5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Just for the drive. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Trevor.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steven Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers, and with the NFL playoffs, we seem to be going back and forth with good games and bad games and good games and bad games, and this weekend, I want to go on the side of more bad games. Green Bay didn't really live up to expectations defensively, letting the Falcons trample them 44-21. And then Pittsburgh barely put up a fight with New England as the Tom Brady era continues, winning 36-17 over the Steelers. We'll start with the Atlanta Falcons. All right, so Matt Ryan MVP, or what are we talking?
I mean, now he's in the Super Bowl, right? So he's one win away from. When it came down to the final four quarterbacks, what was the one thing that everybody was ragging on Matt Ryan about is that he didn't have a Super Bowl ring. Now he's one win away from getting one. And looking at those games, they definitely was a disappointing weekend. I think there's no other way to put it. Both games were practically over at the half. So whenever that's the case, they're horrible football games in terms of competitiveness. But Green Bay did their best, I guess, late trying to work themselves back in it. They just dug obviously way too big of a hole in the first place. And a lot of that has to do with the fact, their defense sucks. Their offense isn't necessarily that great. It's Aaron Rodgers and a bunch of banged up guys. Jordy did play, but the guy broke a couple ribs a couple of weeks ago, so you're not expecting that guy to do much. And Randall Cobb came back from injury not that long ago, and so everybody's practically banged up on offense there for the Packers, including Aaron Rodgers, who's a guy that's dealt with a couple injuries here and there throughout the season. And they just couldn't get things going against the Falcons' defense, which, in my opinion, if they're able to shut down that Green Bay offense, which is mainly Aaron Rodgers, but, maybe they can give the New England Patriots a run for their money in the Super Bowl maybe a little bit if they can pressure the quarterback. And if they force Tom Brady to make quicker decisions, then that could lead to some interesting situations in that game. As for the Steelers and Patriots, it was really disappointing once Le'Veon Bell left the game, because that then right there it left a big hole in the Steelers game and how they like to attack you. And D'Angelo Williams had a chance there down towards the one of trying to drive the football into the end zone and just couldn't. And maybe if Le'Veon Bell's out on the field, they end up scoring there, and maybe it's a bit of a different game. And it's like the same actually with the Packers game as well. And Ripkowski, who he had a first down, it was down in the red zone, and fumbled the football. And and you can make the argument too, maybe that should have been like a safety on the play, or spotted at the one, but they ended up spotting it at their own 20, bringing it out to there on a touchback. So. But, so there were a couple key crucial running plays in the red zone that maybe could have helped lean the game either way. And when it didn't go the way of the team with the football, then the team on defense ends up running over the other team.
Okay, so for New England, watching the game kind of highlighted how good Tom Brady is. And when I say that, early on, Tom Brady kept going with the no-huddle and making plays really quickly and kind of getting the Steelers to have to work on the fly, and they really weren't able to for the most part. What does the Falcons have to do to stop the reign of New England in the Super Bowl?
I think it's really just put pressure on the quarterback once that ball is snapped, and that's where it starts. And obviously, they need to have good pass coverage, because Tom Brady is going to find a way to get the ball out a lot of the time, and you have to be there to stop to get in the way. That's going to be relying on the corners and safeties for that, obviously. But for that defensive line, it's put pressure on the quarterback, and I think the really intriguing matchup. Well, actually, you could say it goes either way, the really intriguing matchup for the Super Bowl. It could be Brady against that Falcons defense to see what they're able to put up. But it could also be Matt Ryan against the Patriots defense as well, because, the Falcons have a great offense. I don't know if you've noticed, but, they put up nearly 50 this weekend. So, they can score a lot of points. They did it against the Packers, but still, this is an offense that can score a lot of points. Just ask Seattle. And I mean, that right there is not a great matchup for the Patriots. And so, I mean, this could be a really intriguing Super Bowl.
So we're going to touch on a couple of different sports really quickly here. Going to tennis for a moment. Number 1, Andy Murray. Gets knocked out of the Australian Open to the number 50th seed. I'm going to butcher this name, and I know that. Misha Zverev. What happened with Andy Murray? Because normally the top 5 seeds don't get knocked out by a 50th seed.
True, it does happen sometimes, and I mean, you could really make an argument as to who you believe in your honest heart-to-heart tennis fans as to who's the real number one. Is it Andy Murray? Is it somebody like a Novak Djokovic? Is it Rafael Nadal if he can stay healthy long enough and play long enough and stuff like that? But I mean, yeah, I mean, upsets will happen. I mean, tennis. I mean, we know all about that. I mean, Eugenie Bouchard, she got really hot and is now getting beat all the time, but I think, for the most part, she when she was getting beat, she had sort of a higher ranking in the women's game. And I mean, when she was making that climb, she was beating women ranked higher than her. I mean, it happens. That's how you kind of move up and down the standings. I mean, it happened to Novak Djokovic a few times, who, in my opinion, is the world number 1 tennis player, even though the rankings don't say that at the moment. But, I mean, it's hard to argue with what Murray has been able to accomplish. He's done well at the Olympics and in majors. He finds a way to be there at the end. But, yeah, I mean, stuff like that's going to happen. And, I mean, it's that first major of the year. So, really, a lot of the time with that first major of the year, anything can happen.
And then moving over to basketball, the Raptors lose to the Phoenix Suns, 3rd straight loss. More the point that I want to bring up is the dominance of the Western Conference. Phoenix is not high up in the Western Conference rankings, but they come to Toronto and they beat the Raptors. Does this show the discrepancy between the two conferences of how good one is, or are the Raptors just on this unstoppable slump?
It was just a bad game, I think, on the part of the Raptors, and a lot of that starts with Kyle Lowry. He had a rough game, and it didn't get any better late with a tech, and then he ended up with a flagrant 2 and then got ejected with a couple minutes left. So, I mean, this was not a good game for Kyle Lowry. It was a tough matchup with Bledsoe. Right there, I mean, that was a big issue for the Raptors. They lost that matchup head-to-head. I mean, DeMar DeRozan, he didn't necessarily have a great game either, but whenever a guy like Bledsoe had like 40 points on the Raptors, whenever something like that happens with the point guard, a guy that has the ball a lot, you know, you're going to be in trouble. And that's right there something that's going to be tough to overcome.
Toronto is still first in the Atlantic Division as well. Philadelphia 76ers, they've won 15 games so far. That's better than last year, so they are improving. A game that was really interesting that happened not too long ago, a few days ago, Golden State Warriors versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Golden State absolutely smucked them. Does this make LeBron kind of doubt himself? I mean, I know they won it last year, but getting walloped by the Golden State Warriors is a thing that many teams are experiencing this year. Mm-hmm. But Cleveland is one of the teams many would consider one of the few that would be able to stop that. Is this concerning for LeBron James, as he is, as people say, the coach, the greatest player of all time, and the Cleveland Cavaliers?
Well, and you look back at that playoff series in the finals last year as well, and what's the big difference between the Warriors last year and this year? It's Kevin Durant, right? I mean, he wasn't on the team obviously last year, but now he is on the Golden State Warriors this year, and I mean that's another problem that you have to deal with if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers or any other of the 28 teams that are going to be potentially playing the Warriors this season. Yeah, that's going to be a tough team to try to stop, and the Cavaliers couldn't do it. But with that being said, I mean, it was one game, and I mean, the Cavaliers, I don't know if they can pull off a win like that against the Warriors. I do think they can beat this Golden State Warriors team. It's tough going into Golden State and performing, and I mean, I guess from a standpoint as well, it's tough for any team from the East to go to the West and play there on a road trip and play, you know, good teams back to back to back to back, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, Golden State, I mean, they're the cream of the crop, and whenever you go into their building, it's going to be tough to play.
So, in hockey, last year, the Tampa Bay Lightning did pretty good. The year before that, they did really good, and they made it to the Stanley Cup final. But this year, they're really, really far back. They're in the ranks with Buffalo, New Jersey, the New York Islanders, who aren't having a great year. what's changed with Tampa Bay? I mean, they got Steven Stamkos. They've more or less kept their team together, but they're not being top of the league like they normally are.
I think it's just a down year for them. They still have a lot of talent. I can't think of any really key players that they would have lost. I mean, yeah, as long as you have Steven Stamkos, who they just brought back on that contract, or, Ben Bishop also, he's been a reliable guy in goal up until this season. But, Ben Bishop's a guy that I think for the most part you can rely on. He's really big. I had a chance to see him play a lot in Ottawa when he was there, and he's a guy that if he's going to struggle, it will be on shots down low, just having to get down to the butterfly because he's so big. But he does take up a lot of that net, and is always going to be hard to beat, regardless of who he is. And I think just in general, their goaltending is set for the future. Ben Bishop's not exactly an old guy yet, and Andrei Vasilevsky is a guy that if you haven't seen him play in the NHL, you probably saw him play in the World Juniors for Russia for like 5 years, it felt like, but it was probably more like 3. He's a phenomenal goaltender as well. And from there, from the back out, Victor Hedman obviously on the blue line as well is a defenseman that, they have a number one defenseman in Victor Hedman. They have their go-to scoring forward in Steven Stamkos. They have Tyler Johnson, who's a phenomenal player as well. So, they kind of have their guys set, and they're not old either. So, that's something there that, they're probably just having a bad year, and I would imagine that they'll be able to turn around, making a few tweaks. Steve Yzerman has, I think, impressed everybody as a general manager in the NHL.
So, finally, in baseball news, we have Jose Bautista, and it seems like a very strong mixed reaction from everybody, saying, oh, we don't want him, this and that, because they think that he was betraying the Blue Jays. But, if you have the option of making a lot of money, I am assuming most people would take the route that he did. He admits that he turned down less money to stay with Toronto. I don't know how much I agree with that. What's your thoughts on the Jays officially re-signing him?
Oh, well, and he's done a couple of interviews since that. So he's now come out and talked about the whole situation this offseason. And, when you hear him talk, to me anyways, he seems pretty sincere with the whole, I wanted to return to Toronto. I think at some point he was wearing a Toronto versus everybody shirt during the season, so I think he really enjoys Toronto. I don't know if many other there was that whole talk over Baltimore and whether they would be interested or whether the hatred potentially for Bautista due to the rivalry would affect something like that. And maybe that affected him in the free agent market to some extent, because he is a bit of a controversial player, is what I'll say. It seems like half the fan base loves him, half the fan base hates him in Toronto. And so obviously there was a lot of mixed reaction as well to the signing. I think what it is think about it this way. This is one of the greatest hitters in this franchise's history. He's up there with the Roberto Alomars. If you think of a big home run, you think of Joe Carter, and Jose Bautista is now right behind him. So he's there. Etched in Blue Jays history. He's going to be on the level of excellence when he eventually does retire, and it's just enjoy it while he's here, because he is still a good hitter. The interesting thing is what they'll do in the outfielder. What they did is they needed an outfielder. I talked about this last week. They needed an outfielder, and Jose Bautista still wants to play in the outfield. I don't know how many teams wanted to give him that chance. The Blue Jays, it seems like for now, will. And, they still need another outfielder. Saunders is off the market now, going to Philly. So they're going to have somebody new in left field, whether that be from in their own house, say a Dalton Pompey, or they are able to bring somebody in. We'll find out.
Also, some more negative news. Yordano Ventura of the Kansas City Royals and Pirates, 33-year-old Andy Marte, both were killed in car accidents in the Dominican Republic over the weekend. But what happens with these players? They're with the contract with the team, and the team's, expecting to have this body back. Does the league end up doing any kind of compensation for the teams, or is it just a tragic accident?
I don't believe so. And situations like this are kind of sad. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about Jose Fernandez, and before that, Oscar Tavares. A few of those guys, these two that just passed away on the weekend, and Oscar Tavares passed away in the Dominican. I have never been to the Dominican Republic. I have heard rumors that the roads are a bit narrower than ours. So, I mean, maybe that has something to do with potential car crashes. But, I mean, you just focus on Yordano Ventura, because that's a guy in this area for baseball fans that I feel like the majority of them didn't really like Yordano, and that had a lot to do with the Royals-Blue Jays rivalry. I mean, obviously, when I saw this news, it's hard not to be sad. Because it's incredibly sad. It's an incredibly sad thing. We're talking about a 25-year-old pitcher that was essentially the ace of the Royal staff, if not working his way to be that. And he had an incredible future ahead of him, and it's gone too soon. And it's incredibly sad just to think about everything. And I mean, Andy Marte as well. I mean, anytime somebody loses their life, it's never a positive thing. And when somebody loses their life while they're in the public eye, like a Yordano Ventura, Andy Marte, Major League Baseball players, it's sad.
That's it for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at BSS Sports, archiving all of our works on YouTube at BSS Productions. For Steven Schill and Trevor Struthers, we'll catch you next month.